My sister-in-law's birthday turned into a nightmare. She framed my 11-year-old son for stealing a $780,000 luxury watch, then shattered a crystal frame on his shoulder. As blood spilled, secrets unraveled. But when her own fiancé exposed her shocking truth, what happened next left the entire city speechless. If someone had told me a year ago that my quiet life would one day become the talk of Asheville's high society, I would have laughed and gone back to grading spelling tests. My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 38, a second-grade teacher, and I've spent most of my life trying to stay away from drama. I live in a cozy two-story home with my husband Caleb and our son Ethan, who just turned 11. I love my job, I love my family, and, for the most part, I loved the calm rhythm of our life. That is, until the Whitmores pulled us into a storm I never saw coming. Caleb, my husband, is a brilliant software engineer, quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who listens more than he speaks. He's also the son of Catherine Whitmore, a name that means something around here. If you've lived in Asheville long enough, you've heard it. The Whitmores are old money, wrapped in polished charm and steeped in control. Catherine is the kind of woman who commands a room without speaking, and she never once approved of me. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I wasn't the kind of woman she imagined her son would marry. "You're a teacher," she once told me, her voice like glass. Noble, yes, but not Whitmore. That's how she saw the world, divided between those who belonged and those who didn't. I belonged in her eyes about as much as a sticker book at an art gallery. We didn't see her much, by design more than chance. Holidays were short. Phone calls were formal. And even when she saw Ethan, her only grandchild, she kept a polite but cold distance, like he was a visitor in her carefully curated life. But that didn't stop Ethan from trying. He's got his dad's gentle spirit, always looking for the good in people, even when it hurts. Then one afternoon last spring, Caleb came home from work with a strange expression. "She wants us to come to the estate," he said, "for Sabrina's birthday." Sabrina, his sister. If Catherine was made of ice, Sabrina was fire. Glamorous, loud, dramatic. She was turning 31 and throwing one of her usual extravagant parties at Asheville Hall. The kind of event that made it into the lifestyle section of the city paper. Of course, we were invited. We were family, but it never felt like that. I hesitated. "Why now?" "She said it's important," Caleb replied, his voice tight. "Something about a family moment, and she specifically asked for you and Ethan." That was unusual. Catherine usually made it clear she preferred we stay in the background. But there was something in Caleb's eyes, something tired and already resigned, so I nodded. "Okay," I said. "We'll go." The day we visited the Whitmore estate, the air already felt heavy. The house sat like a monument in Asheville's historic district, white columns, a winding stone path, windows too large for privacy. Ethan walked beside me, holding my hand loosely, his eyes flicking toward the tall hedges and trimmed rose bushes like he was exploring a museum. Catherine greeted us at the door. Her silver hair was swept up, her pearl necklace perfect, her smile sharp. "Rachel," she said with that usual formality.
"Ethan.
"Welcome." She led us into the sitting room, where Sabrina and her fiancé Logan were already waiting. Logan stood up politely and shook my hand. He seemed quieter than I expected, a calm contrast to Sabrina's energy. She wore a crimson blouse and diamond earrings that sparkled even in the soft light. And, of course, her tone was as smug as ever. "Glad you made it," Sabrina said. "The party's going to be amazing. Real elite. Just like the old Whitmore days." I gave a polite smile. "We're happy to be here." Then Catherine turned toward a display case in the room. Glass, locked, lit from above like something in a museum. "I thought you should see this," she said, her voice wrapped in pride. "It's being unveiled at Sabrina's celebration." Inside the case sat something small, round and gleaming, a watch. But not just any watch. "This," she continued, "is a limited edition Swiss luxury diamond watch. Only 5 exist in the world. This one belonged to your great-grandfather, Caleb. And now, it will be part of our family legacy again. It's valued at $780,000. The number hung in the air like a secret no one was supposed to say out loud. I looked at the watch again, now realizing why it was so heavily protected. Sabrina beamed. It's the centerpiece of the party. The press will be there. We're making a statement. I glanced down at Ethan. He was looking at it, eyes wide but respectful. He had always loved history, stories behind objects, and he seemed fascinated more than anything. Catherine's gaze snapped to him. Ethan, dear, she said smoothly. Do be careful not to get too close. It's a priceless piece. I felt Ethan stiffen beside me. He hadn't even moved. He understands, I said calmly. He's very careful. I'm sure he is, Catherine replied, but her tone made it clear. He was being watched. We didn't stay long after that. On the drive home, Ethan was quiet. I asked him if he was okay, and he nodded. Grandma doesn't like me, he said after a pause. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, but I couldn't lie. She doesn't understand you, I said. But that's her mistake, not yours. Caleb reached for my hand and squeezed it gently. Just a few hours at the party, he said. We'll get through it. But deep in my chest, I felt something shift. Something about that day. The tension in Catherine's voice, the pride in Sabrina's smile, the watch glittering under the glass. It all felt like a warning. A signal we'd missed. I wish we'd turned around and left right then. But we didn't. We went to that party. And everything changed. The night of Sabrina's birthday party arrived too quickly. I remember standing in front of the mirror, adjusting the straps of my dress, trying to calm the strange flutter in my stomach. Caleb stood behind me, tying his tie with slow, practiced movements. Neither of us said much. There was a shared understanding between us, a silent agreement to stay calm, stay polite, and get through it for Ethan's sake. Ethan looked handsome in his little navy blazer and white button-up shirt. He grinned when I smoothed his hair and asked, "Do I look like Dad?" I laughed and nodded. "Even better," I whispered, giving him a kiss on the cheek. We arrived at Asheville Hall just after 7. The venue looked like something from a magazine. White marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and tables set with gold-rimmed glassware. Everything sparkled. The guests were dressed in gowns and tuxedos, and soft jazz music floated through the air like perfume. People smiled, sipped champagne, and dropped compliments like flower petals. We were greeted by a staff member who handed us a program. The cover read, Sabrina Whitmore, A Celebration of Elegance. Her name alone was enough to draw in half the city's social elite. Catherine stood near the entrance, dressed in deep emerald green, talking to a senator's wife. She glanced at us with her usual tight smile. "You're here." "Good," she said, then quickly returned to her conversation. Sabrina made her grand entrance around 8, descending the curved staircase like she was royalty. Her dress shimmered silver, and cameras clicked from every direction. Logan stood to the side, clapping politely. He looked proud, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I held Ethan's hand and leaned down. "Stay close to us, okay?" He nodded, already overwhelmed by the crowd. The centerpiece of the evening, besides Sabrina herself, was the luxury watch. It sat in a glass case at the front of the room, spotlighted like a sacred treasure. Guests took turns admiring it, whispering about its value and exclusivity. Catherine made sure to tell everyone it was a Whitmore legacy piece, with a voice loud enough for the press to hear. Sabrina, of course, stood beside it like a proud curator. Ethan and I hung back, mostly near the dessert table. He wasn't interested in cake, just watching everything, quietly absorbing the mood. I was talking to a woman from the school board when it happened. A scream. Sharp. Piercing. Loud enough to make the music stop. The watch. Sabrina's voice rang through the hall. "It's gone." All heads turned. She was standing next to the display case, pointing at the empty pedestal inside. The case door hung open. Her face twisted in panic, and within seconds, a crowd gathered. Guests murmured confused. Catherine rushed over, and her expression went from shock to icy rage in a heartbeat. "Who was near it?" she demanded. And then Sabrina pointed, right at Ethan. "That boy. I saw him near the case earlier," she shouted. I froze. My heart sank. Ethan stood beside me, pale and wide-eyed, shaking his head. "What?" he whispered. "You're lying," I said, stepping in front of him. "He's been with me the whole time." "I saw him," Sabrina insisted. "He was looking at it, obsessed with it. He must have snuck in when no one was watching." The guests were whispering now, watching Ethan like he'd grown horns. Catherine narrowed her eyes. "Ethan," she said coldly, "did you touch the watch?" "No," he cried. "I didn't even go near it." I knelt beside him. "It's okay, baby. You didn't do anything wrong." But Sabrina wasn't done. Her voice rose again. "You little thief. You ruined everything." And before I could move, she grabbed a heavy crystal photo frame from the table and smashed it against Ethan's shoulder. The sound of glass shattering was deafening. He stumbled back into a decorative stand and collapsed to the floor, crying out in pain as shards cut his arm. Gasps filled the room. A few people screamed. Caleb rushed to our son, dropping to his knees. "Ethan," I cried, pushing through the people crowding around us. Blood ran down his arm, and he clutched his shoulder in pain. My hands shook as I pulled him close, tears stinging my eyes. "What is wrong with you?" Caleb roared, rising to face Sabrina. "He stole it," she screamed, pointing again. "He's a child," Caleb shouted. "And you just attacked him." Then a quiet voice broke through the chaos. "No, he didn't steal anything." All heads turned. "Logan." He stepped forward, eyes locked on Sabrina. His expression was blank, almost sad. "That's enough." Sabrina spun toward him, shocked. "What are you talking about?" He pulled his phone from his pocket and held it up. "I have something to show everyone." Sabrina's face turned white. He tapped a few buttons, then turned the screen toward the crowd. It was footage, security footage from the event's prep room. It showed Sabrina standing alone near the watch display earlier in the evening. She looked around, then slowly opened the glass case. She reached in, took the watch, and slipped it into her handbag. Murmurs exploded. Someone gasped audibly. Another guest whispered, "She set him up?" Logan turned to the crowd. "She staged the whole thing. She planned to report it stolen and file an insurance claim. The debts, the condo, she couldn't keep up. So she lied." Catherine looked like the wind had been knocked out of her. "I didn't," Sabrina started, but the footage was still playing. "You framed an 11-year-old, Caleb growled. "And you hurt him." My son clung to me, trembling. I looked up at the faces around us, guests who had just been laughing over champagne, now staring with horror and disbelief. The Whitmore name, polished and proud, was cracking right in front of them. And I knew, deep down, this was just the beginning. The room stood frozen for what felt like hours. No one moved, no one spoke. All eyes were on Sabrina, whose hand now clutched the side of her dress, like she was holding herself together. Logan lowered his phone, but the damage was already done. The truth hung in the air like broken glass, sharp and undeniable. Sabrina's eyes darted from person to person. "It's fake," she stammered. "The video, it's edited." "Logan, you know me. I would never." Her voice cracked as she tried to muster the performance of her life. But no one was buying it. "You hurt my son," I said, my voice low but shaking. "And then you tried to ruin him." Caleb stood beside me, his eyes locked on his sister. "Why, Sabrina? Why would you do this?" She blinked, her mouth opening and closing like she was struggling for air. "I didn't think it would go this far. I needed the money. The condo, the wedding, the vendors, everything was falling apart. No one was supposed to get hurt." Ethan whimpered softly against my chest, and Caleb crouched to check the cuts on his arm again. People were starting to move now, some guests stepping back, others whispering behind their hands. A few pulled out their phones. Then Catherine stepped forward. "Enough," she said sharply. Sabrina looked at her with wide, desperate eyes. "Mom, you believe me, right? Tell them it's not true." But Catherine didn't answer right away. She was too busy scanning the room, reading the faces of the people she'd once impressed, business owners, politicians, the press. Her carefully built world was shattering. Then Logan said something that made everyone stop again. She didn't do it alone. Catherine's gaze snapped toward him. He continued, steady and cold. Catherine knew. I overheard them days ago, in her study. She told Sabrina the family couldn't afford another scandal, so if she went through with the plan, she had to make it believable. Catherine suggested blaming Ethan. He's quiet, she said. People will believe it, especially coming from you. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. My hands went to Ethan's hair, and I pulled him closer. Caleb stood slowly, his face white with fury. You let this happen? You let her frame our son. Catherine didn't flinch. I didn't expect it to escalate like this, she said stiffly. I only wanted to protect the family. By destroying mine? I said, my voice shaking. She turned to me, her tone still cold and clipped. Your family doesn't carry the Whitmore name. And that was it. That one sentence said everything she believed, that Ethan, that Caleb, that we were disposable if it meant protecting her reputation. That's when Caleb pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police, he said firmly. You can't be serious, Catherine snapped. I should have done it the moment she hit Ethan, he said. The room was silent again. Then someone near the back said, Good. Another guest nodded. Finally, Caleb stepped outside the ballroom to make the call while I stayed with Ethan. Logan stood by quietly, not defending Sabrina, not even looking at her. He seemed drained, like a man who had finally pulled the last truth from his chest and had nothing left to say. Within minutes, red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Detective Rivas arrived, walking in with calm authority. He was a tall man, mid-40s maybe, with steady eyes and a notepad already in hand. We received a report of an assault and possible insurance fraud, he said. That's correct, Caleb replied. We have video evidence and witnesses. Sabrina looked panicked now, her mask completely gone. Logan, please help me. Say something. They can't take me. Logan shook his head. I tried to help you, but you made your choice. Rivas signaled for another officer. Miss Sabrina Whitmore, you are under arrest for assaulting a minor, filing a false police report, and attempting to commit insurance fraud. She gasped. No. I'm a Whitmore. You can't. But the officer was already reading her rights as he slipped handcuffs onto her wrists. People moved aside as she was let out. I'll never forget how she looked, like someone who had never imagined the consequences could be real. As they walked past, Ethan turned his head into my shoulder. She's gone, I whispered to him. It's over. But it wasn't. Not yet. Detective Rivas turned to Catherine next. Ma'am, we have a witness stating you were involved in planning the false report. Is that true? Catherine lifted her chin. I won't answer questions without legal representation. Understood, he replied. But you'll need to come with us for questioning. We've also received a notice from federal financial investigators. Your personal accounts are under review. That caught her off guard. Her composure cracked for a split second before she quickly recovered. This is absurd, she muttered, but she didn't resist when they led her toward the exit. As she passed, her eyes met mine. I didn't gloat. I didn't say a word. I just held Ethan's hand tighter. After they were gone, the room seemed to exhale all at once. The tension dropped. Guests began to leave, their faces unreadable, and not a single person wished the Whitmores well. Caleb returned to us, kneeling beside Ethan. You did nothing wrong, he told him. None of this was your fault. Ethan nodded, sniffling, and I could see it in his eyes. He was starting to believe it again. Later that night, after we were home, after Ethan was asleep, Caleb and I sat on the porch in silence. I can't believe it, he whispered finally. I can, I said softly. They were always so afraid of losing control. That kind of fear makes people dangerous. He looked at me, his voice thick. I'm so sorry, Rachel. You didn't do this, I said. But you ended it. For Ethan. That's what matters now. We held hands under the stars, knowing that while the worst was over, the rest was still to come. The trials, the press, the fallout, but also the healing. We'd find it together. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind, headlines, interviews, subpoenas. Our faces weren't in the news, but Ethan's name came up more times than I could count. I did everything I could to shield him from it, but you can't hide everything. Kids talk. Parents whisper. And trauma doesn't just fade away. But he was strong. Stronger than most people twice his age. His wounds healed slowly, both the ones on his arm and the ones no one could see. I saw the way he flinched at sudden noises, how he avoided mirrors for a while. But every day, little by little, he found pieces of his confidence again. And Caleb and I, we were right there beside him, every step. When the trial began, I didn't know how it would feel sitting in that courtroom, staring across at people who once called themselves family. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry, yes. Still hurt. But mostly I was ready. Sabrina sat at the defendant's table, her appearance a shadow of the woman who used to walk around like a crown belonged on her head. The designer clothes were gone, her face pale, her hands constantly wringing in her lap. She barely looked up the entire time. Catherine sat next to her, still trying to keep her posture, still attempting to act untouchable. But her eyes looked hollow, tired, like reality had finally caught up. The prosecution laid out everything: the security footage, the insurance papers, the financial records, and most importantly, the attack on Ethan. When the video of that moment played in court, the sound of glass breaking, Ethan's cry of pain, the entire room fell into stunned silence. I looked at him then, sitting quietly beside me, his hand in mine. His back was straighter than usual. He didn't look away. Then came Logan's testimony. He told the truth, every painful, uncomfortable part of it. He admitted that he had tried to stop Sabrina, that he had begged her to reconsider. But in the end, he chose to expose her because what she had done was unforgivable.
It wasn't about the money, he said.
It was about pride and the belief that no one could touch her. The judge didn't need long. Sabrina was sentenced to 6 years in prison and ordered to pay $600,000 in damages, a large portion of which went to Ethan's therapy and medical costs. Her assets were seized, her accounts frozen, and her name no longer carried weight in the city. Catherine's trial came next. The financial fraud ran deep. The court revealed offshore accounts, false tax filings, and a long history of manipulating charity donations to hide income. The IRS testimony was the final nail. Her sentence? 11 years in federal prison and complete seizure of her estate. The Whitmore mansion was put up for auction. She didn't say a word when the verdict was read. She just stood, fixed her coat, and walked out without looking back. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt free. After everything, we returned to the one place that had always felt like home, my classroom. The principal offered me time off, but I needed to be back. I needed the noise of children, the smell of crayons, the simple rhythm of daily life.
And Ethan?
He came with me after school sometimes. Sat in the corner, reading quietly, occasionally helping kids with their projects. One afternoon, a group of second graders begged for a story. I was about to grab a book when Ethan stepped forward. "Can I read to them, Mom?" he asked. I froze for a second. "Of course," I said. He took the book from my hand, stood in front of the tiny chairs filled with eager faces, and smiled. "This story," he began, "is called The Truth Always Comes Out." He read every word with confidence. And when he was done, they clapped like he'd won an award. Maybe he had. I stood by the bookshelf, my eyes wet, watching my son. Not a victim, not a headline, not a boy who had been bruised and broken, but a boy who stood tall, who had survived something ugly and come out brighter. Caleb picked us up later that day. We didn't talk about the Whitmores anymore. They were part of our past now, not our future. That night, after dinner, Ethan looked at us and said, "I'm glad it happened." I looked at him, startled. "Why?" "Because now I know," he said. "People can lie and hurt you. But if you stay true to what's right, the truth wins." And he was right. In the end, the Whitmore name fell, but we rose. Not rich, not powerful, just honest and whole. And that, to me, was everything.